You're sitting at your kitchen table on a Sunday morning with a cup of coffee and your laptop open to your bank's transaction history. You're scrolling, and you're doing that thing where you're not really looking. You're skimming, because you already know, roughly, where your money goes. You pay your mortgage, you pay your car. You cover the utilities, the insurance, the groceries. You're not reckless. You're not out buying boats. You have a savings account. You're doing fine. Here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. A survey by the CFP board in 2023 found that when people sit down with a financial planner for the first time, they underestimate their own discretionary spending by 20 to 40%. Not 5%, not a rounding error. A gap so wide that when the real numbers come back, most clients go quiet. That gap is what this is about. Not any single purchase, not your coffee, not your lunch. The pattern underneath, the one you've never consciously approved, never budgeted for, and never seen clearly. Because it's made up of transactions too small to trigger alarm individually and too numerous to reconstruct from memory. Financial advisors see it in the first 4 minutes of reviewing a new client's spending. And what they see tells a story most people didn't know they were writing. Let me be specific about what I mean by pattern, because this is where the usual advice gets it wrong. You've heard the latte argument. David Bach put it in a book in 2004. Skip the latte, invest the difference, retire rich. And it sounds reasonable until you actually run the math against the forces that dominate a household budget. Harold Pollack at the University of Chicago and financial journalist Helene Olin did exactly that. Their conclusion: structural expenses, housing, transportation, insurance, healthcare, are so large that eliminating small discretionary purchases alone does not generate meaningful wealth, especially in the context of stagnant wages and rising fixed costs. So no, this is not a stop buying coffee video. But here's what financial planners actually observe, and it is different from the latte lecture. It is not any one small purchase. It is the accumulation of multiple small recurring categories running simultaneously. Coffee and lunch out, and a convenience snack, and an impulse app purchase, and a vending machine hit. That together form a spending channel the client has never consciously created. The CFP board's consumer survey found that households averaging $15 to $25 a day in combined small discretionary transactions spent between $5,400 and $9,100 annually in a category they estimated at $1,500 to $3,000. The gap between what people thought they spent in microtransactions and what they actually spent averaged 62%. Let me translate that. If you buy a $4 coffee, a $12 lunch, a $3 afternoon snack, and you do this most workdays, and you also have a subscription box and an app renewal and a streaming add-on you forgot about. None of these is the problem. The system they form is the problem. And the system is invisible to the person living inside it precisely because no single transaction crosses the threshold of attention. Advisors call it micro-leak spending. It is practitioner language, not an academic term, but the phenomenon it describes is thoroughly documented. And the reason it matters is not that you should feel guilty about lunch. It's that you have a budget line in your life. A significant one, potentially $700 to $800 a month, that you never approved, never reviewed, and never decided was worth what it costs you. That's the first pattern. Let me give you the second, because this one is going to sting. 22.77%. That is the average credit card APR as of late 2024, according to the Federal Reserve. 0.46%. That is the national average savings account APY as of January 2025 per the FDIC. Now, hold both of those numbers in your mind while I describe what millions of American households are doing right now. They are carrying a credit card balance, let's say $6,000, while simultaneously holding roughly the same amount in a savings account. They are making minimum payments on the card. They feel responsible because they have savings. Run the math. $6,000 at 22.77% cost you approximately $1,339 a year in interest. $6,000 at 0.46% earns you about $28. You are losing over $1,300 a year on money you already have. You are effectively paying a 22% annual fee for the psychological comfort of seeing a balance in your savings account. Richard Thaler won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2017 partly for explaining why people do this. He called it mental accounting, the cognitive habit of treating savings and debt as separate psychological buckets rather than as one unified balance sheet. Your brain files the savings account under safety and the credit card under bills. They never meet. They never get compared. And the spread between them bleeds you quietly, month after month, year after year. A Kitch's research survey of financial planners found that 67% of advisors listed this as one of their top 5 most commonly observed client mistakes. Not because clients are foolish, because the mental architecture that creates it is deeply human. And nobody in the system, not the bank, not the credit card company, is paid to point it out. The bank wants your deposits. The card company wants your minimums. Both are being served. You are not. And here is where it gets sharper. High-yield savings accounts at online banks were offering 4.5% to 5% APY as of January 2025. So even if you have a reason to keep that savings balance, and there are legitimate reasons, the difference between the default account and the best available account is over 4 percentage points on the same money. The choice of where your savings sits is itself a financial decision worth hundreds of dollars a year. And most people never make it. They just stay where they open the account. Status quo bias. Samuelson and Zeckhauser named it in 1988. Once you're in a default, the friction of switching exceeds the perceived benefit of changing, even when the math is unambiguous. Let me shift to something less obvious, and in some ways more important. Pull up your spending for the last 12 months. Look for a category that might be called education, professional development, books, courses, certifications, skill-building tools. If you're like a significant number of the people financial advisors sit down with, that category is empty. 0. That absence tells a story. The Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco published research showing that workers who invested in professional certifications or continuing education after age 40 saw median wage premiums of 6 to 12% within 3 years compared to matched peers. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Employment Projections data consistently shows that credentials and continuing education correlate with lower unemployment and higher median earnings across most professional categories. Now, the absence of learning spending does not mechanically cause income stagnation. Correlation is not causation, but advisors report that over multi-year advisory relationships, clients with zero allocation to self-investment tend to show flat income trajectories. And the math on that is brutal, because a 6 to 12% wage premium on a $75,000 salary is $4,500 to $9,000 a year. Over a decade, that premium compounds. Over a career, it reshapes everything. You are not just spending money when you buy a course or a certification. You are spending future earning power when you don't. And the decision to not spend in this category is still a spending decision. It just doesn't show up on any statement. Here's one that will sound familiar to almost everyone listening. Subscriptions. A 2024 report by C+R Research found that the average American consumer believed they spent about $86 a month on subscriptions. The actual average was $200. That is a 133% underestimation. Not a small miss. You think you're spending less than half of what you're actually spending. And the pattern advisors see in the 40-plus demographic is specific. It is layered subscriptions that served an original purpose and persisted after the purpose ended. The streaming service you got for one show 3 years ago. The gym membership you used hard for 3 months after a health scare. The meal kit that was great when both of you were working overtime. The news app you opened twice. Each one is $10 to $30. Together they form a $150 to $400 monthly category. This is not an accident. The FTC has taken enforcement actions against companies for deliberately making cancellation harder than enrollment. The CFPB finalized a click-to-cancel rule in October 2024, requiring businesses to make leaving as easy as joining. That rule exists because the friction was engineered. You are not forgetful. You are being managed. Let me give you the pattern that advisors say is the hardest to discuss with clients, because the client walks in believing they're doing everything right. You got a raise, and your spending went up by exactly the same amount. The Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances documents this across income brackets. Among households earning $75,000 to $150,000, savings rates averaged 6 to 8%. Among households earning $150,000 to $250,000, literally double, savings rates averaged only 8 to 10%. The savings increase was marginal. The spending increase was nearly proportional. When your spending tracks perfectly with your income increases, you've given yourself a 0% raise in financial security. The money came in. The money went out. Your life got more comfortable. Your financial position did not change. This is not about discipline. This is about defaults. Without a deliberate decision to redirect new income, the path of least resistance is absorption. A better car feels natural. A nicer restaurant feels earned. An upgraded subscription feels trivial. And each one is trivial. But the system they create is not. If you're nodding at that, you already know this. You just needed someone to say it with the numbers attached. Now, I want you to think about convenience, not any one convenience purchase. The pattern across all of them. BLS price data shows that convenience format purchases carry premiums of 30 to 150% depending on category. Pre-cut vegetables versus whole. Single serve versus bulk. Delivered versus picked up. The USDA's food price analysis shows that food away from home costs approximately 3.2 times the equivalent nutritional value prepared at home. The advisor red flag is not that you bought pre-cut vegetables on a Tuesday when you were exhausted. The red flag is when the convenience premium is consistent across every category, every week, every month. Always delivered, always pre-made, always name brand, always new, never repaired. That pattern, sustained over a year, can represent thousands of dollars. And it is almost never a conscious choice. It is a default that feels like a preference. And then there's the rewards trap. The Federal Reserve Bank of Boston found that consumers who use rewards credit cards spend 12 to 18% more per transaction than they would with debit or cash, even controlling for income. You tell yourself you're being smart. 3% back on dining. But 3% back on $800 a month in restaurant spending is $24. If 400 of that spending was driven by the card itself, you've spent 400 to earn 24. The math does not care about the dopamine hit of accumulating points. Here is where I want you to step back and see the whole picture. These are not 14 separate problems. They are facets of the same structural reality. The system around your spending is designed, not by conspiracy, not by secret rooms, but by ordinary incentive structures, to make every dollar you earn flow outward as smoothly as possible. The bank wants your deposits at the lowest possible rate. The credit card company wants your minimums at the highest possible rate. The subscription service wants your inertia. The rewards program wants your incremental spending. The convenience economy wants your time-money trade-off to default to spending every single time. Nobody in this system is paid to tell you what you just heard. Your bank doesn't call you to say you're losing $1,300 a year on the spread between your savings and your credit card. Your subscription services don't email you to say you haven't logged in for 8 months. Your credit card company doesn't flag that your reward spending is costing you more than it's earning. This is not evil. It is math. And the math has a direction. And the direction is away from you. Let me talk about the 2 patterns advisors find that feel responsible but aren't. First, round number savings with no calculation behind it. The FINRA Foundation's Financial Capability Study found that among Americans who save, 44% chose a target based on a round number rather than a calculation tied to a specific goal. I save $200 a month. I'm saving for $100,000. These are anchored to what feels right, not to what retirement actually costs. As of 2022, median retirement savings for families aged 55 to 64 was $185,000. Under the 4% withdrawal guideline, that generates $7,400 a year. That is not a retirement. That is a monthly expense. And yet the person saving their round number believes they are saving. They feel responsible. The number just has no relationship to any actual need. And nobody told them to run the calculation because running the calculation is uncomfortable. And the financial system prefers you comfortable and contributing. Second, paying for premium tiers you use at basic tier level. The premium checking account with benefits you've never activated. The unlimited data plan when you average 3 gigabytes a month. The comprehensive auto insurance on a car worth less than the deductible differential. CFPB consumer complaint data shows this across banking, insurance, streaming, and telecommunications. Advisors report finding $50 to $200 a month here in a routine review. The mechanism is status quo bias again. Once you're enrolled in the higher tier, the effort of evaluating and downgrading feels like more trouble than it's worth. So you pay. Month after month, year after year. There's one more I want to name because it is the quietest and possibly the most expensive. Zero spending on preventive maintenance. No line item for home upkeep. No regular vehicle service, no dental cleanings, no annual physical. And then, the emergency. The roof leak, the transmission, the dental crisis that requires a crown instead of a cleaning. Every one of these was preventable or reducible. The Department of Health and Human Services estimates that every dollar spent on preventive dental care avoids approximately $8 to $50 in restorative and emergency care. Home inspectors recommend budgeting 1 to 3% of home value annually for maintenance. Skip it, and the deferred maintenance bill arrives 3 to 7 years later as a crisis that breaks the budget, triggers credit card debt, and starts the whole cycle over. The advisor doesn't see your purchases. They see the story your spending tells about what you've automated, what you've forgotten, and what you've avoided. And that story, viewed clearly, is not about willpower or character. It is about defaults and systems, and the cognitive architecture that makes the path of least resistance the most expensive path over time. So what do you do with this? I'm not going to tell you to cancel your subscriptions. I'm not going to tell you to stop buying coffee. I'm not going to hand you a budget template and tell you to track every dollar. Because research in the Journal of Marketing Research found that for some personality types, excessive tracking actually increases anxiety-driven spending. The cure can worsen the disease. What I will tell you is this: awareness of the pattern is the thing that changes the pattern, not awareness of the purchase, awareness of the system, the co-occurrence, the accumulation, the spread between what you think you spend and what you actually spend, which, for most people, is a gap wide enough to reshape a retirement. If you're currently carrying credit card debt while money sits in a savings account, earning less than 0.5%, the math on that is settled. If you haven't reviewed your subscriptions against your actual usage in the last year, the data says you're paying for something you've forgotten you own. If your spending rose by the same amount as your last raise, that raise did not improve your financial position. These are not judgments. They are measurements. Tell me in the comments, which of these patterns did you recognize in your own spending? Not because I want to make you feel bad about it, because the recognition is where the shift starts. And I suspect most of you saw at least 3 of these and felt something tighten in your chest. The question that matters is not whether you have these patterns. Statistically, you almost certainly do. The question is whether you've actually looked, with the real numbers, without rounding in your own favor. Because the math is the math, regardless of whether you run it. It runs itself. It has been running itself for years. The only difference is whether you're reading the story it's telling. A financial advisor once described it this way: they don't see what you buy. They see what you've decided without deciding. They see the architecture of your financial life that you built without a blueprint. And it has a shape. And that shape has a cost. And the cost is specific. And it is yours. You are not behind because you bought coffee. You are not behind because you lack discipline. You are behind, if you are behind, because the system around your money was designed by people whose income depends on your inattention. And because the human brain was not built to track 417 small transactions a month against a retirement goal 30 years away. That is not a personal failure. That is a design problem. And the first step in solving any design problem is seeing the design. Subscribe if you want more of this, the stuff nobody else is telling you. And the next time you open your bank app and start scrolling, don't skim. Read it like someone who knows what the patterns mean. Because now you do.